Many of us throughout this time of pandemic, at least when it started, had various television shows or other media that we hadn't gotten to see and wanted to catch up on. And so we dived into these things at the beginning of the pandemic. And one of these shows for me is called Community. Now, Community follows a study group at a community college that often gets into shenanigans, often gets into ridiculous situations. One of these particular situations is a costume party that goes wrong. Before and after this costume party, we see two characters talking with each other. One is Abed, who everyone is trying to diagnose instead of actually listen to the wisdom he has to offer. The other is Troy, a football player who landed at this community college after losing his scholarship to the school of his choice because he injured himself at a party. Now, at this particular party, at this costume party, we see Troy dressed up as Eddie Murphy, and we see Abed dressed up as Batman. And at the end of the party, the two of them are talking, and Troy is getting tips from Abed about how to talk like Batman. And as they're both talking in their Batman voices, they have this conversation that ends up discussing food, ends up discussing gingerbread men at the very end of it. And it's at this point that Troy says to Abed, "That's one of my greatest fears." And Abed responds, "What is?" "If I ever woke up as a donut." Abed looks at him, no emotion betrayed at all, and just simply says, "You would eat yourself." And Troy responds back, "I wouldn't even question it." And Abed's response is, "That'd be tasty." And then Troy states to Abed, "It's cool to know other people think about this stuff too." Abed's response is simply to say, "Yeah. Now, this is a very silly conversation that they get into. But Troy, in talking about these things, is showing Abed a side of himself that he wouldn't normally share with other people. Now, at this point in time, Troy and Abed have been slowly having more conversations, slowly getting to know each other more. But it's at this point that we start to see their friendship blossom. It's at this point that they truly start to become friends. What Troy has done with Abed is share a great gift. The gift of himself, really. He shared with him something that he wouldn't normally share with other people. And in spite of its silliness, I share this story because we all have something like this. It's easier to share a story like this than to share a story that might betray somebody else's trust. Because all of us, whether we have had this in our relationships with our spouses or our friends, family, even our mentors, we all have stories where we or somebody else, we or another person in our lives has either shared or been shared with something important about ourselves, something of ourselves. We've all had an experience where we've given or received the gift of ourselves or received the gift of another. As a colleague of mine pointed out to me this week, the Trinity is the means by which God shares that gift, that God shares the gift of God's self to us. Because without the Trinity, we wouldn't have this great connection with God. We wouldn't know what we do know about God. It's through the Trinity that we have a gift from God of who God is. Now, part of the reason that we need this, part of the reason that we need this gift of who God is in the Trinity is because of sin. Sin is anything that separates us from God. And as I've often heard it described, and you may have heard it described this way too, what sin really is it's a chasm we cannot cross that separates us from God. Now, thankfully, we have one of the persons of the Trinity there to help bridge this chasm for us. And that person is the Son, or also the Word, as we hear the Son referred to at the very beginning of the Gospel according to John. The Son is God coming into this world. And in coming into this world, the Son is there with us in the dirtiness, and on a day like today, a rainy day, the muddiness of it all. The Son is there with us, isn't afraid to get in the depths of that dirt and that mud, to be with us, to be one with us, to be one of us as a human being. And as I've often heard it described as well, and again, you may have heard this description too, the cross is that means of crossing that chasm. It becomes that bridge to be there to allow us to walk back to the Father, to be in closer relationship with God. And it's through the person of the Son in the Trinity that we're able to have that relationship with God once again. But it doesn't stop there. A relationship with God continues to be fostered by all of the Holy Trinity. Because as we've been seeing this week, as we heard last week in Pentecost, as we've been hearing throughout the Gospel according to John these past several weeks, the Holy Spirit is there. The Son sends that Holy Spirit upon us so that we may have God's abiding presence with us always. Because that's what the Holy Spirit is. God's abiding presence with us now and forever. Not only do we have that chasm bridged for us in the Son, but thanks to the Holy Spirit, we have God's presence with us at all times. Our relationship with God has only become more and more intimate and close, thanks to that Holy Spirit. God's gift to us is God's very self. And we see that expressed to us in the Holy Trinity. The Trinity is what allows us to become closer to God through each of these persons. Through each of these persons, we come to know God more fully. That is the wonderful gift that God gives us through the Trinity. That is the very thing that we celebrate today. That chance, that hope to once again come close to God in relationship. and to develop that relationship and have that relationship present with us as God is present with